Welcome to your favorite channel for learning everything you need for financial success. Let's get started.
All right, let's dive right into one of the biggest, most stressful financial questions anyone can face. In 2026, does it make more sense to rent a place or to buy a home? You know, the answer used to feel pretty straightforward, but today, well, it's a whole different ballgame. So, is this the year? Is this the moment to finally take that leap into homeownership? I mean, you see one headline that says the market's hot and another that says it's cooling. It is incredibly confusing, and it's tough to know if you're about to make a brilliant move or a really expensive mistake. But here's the thing you have to understand. People who track this stuff for a living, they're not calling this a crash, and they're not calling it a boom. They're calling it the Great Housing Reset. And today, we're going to figure out exactly what that means for your wallet. Okay, so to even begin to tackle the rent versus buy debate, we first have to get our heads around this new economic world we're living in. Because, trust me, the old rules just don't apply anymore. First, let's get a reality check on mortgage rates. Now, it's true they've thankfully come down from those eye-watering 7% peaks, but let's be really clear, the era of the 3% mortgage is over. It's gone. This new normal of around 6% is the bedrock for all the math we're about to do.
And while we're at it, let's bust a huge myth right now. Home prices aren't about to crash. Pretty much all the experts agree on this one. We're looking at slow, pretty boring growth of maybe 2–3% a year, basically just keeping up with inflation. No massive windfalls, but no terrifying drops either. And that stability, that's a huge part of this market reset.
But here's the good news in all of this. For the first time in over a decade, seriously, think about that. Your income is actually expected to grow faster than home prices. It means that affordability, which has been a nightmare, is finally, slowly, starting to get just a little bit better. Okay, so we get the landscape now. So for this next part, I'm going to give you 3 simple but super powerful financial tools. Think of this as your universal toolkit that'll help you make a smart decision no matter what city you're in.
First up is something called the price-to-rent ratio. It sounds kind of nerdy, but I promise, it's simple. Just think of it like the PE ratio you'd look at for a stock, but for a house. It's a fantastic shortcut to see if buying in your city is a bargain or a ripoff compared to just renting. And the rules of thumb here are just beautiful. If that ratio is 15 or less where you live, the numbers are screaming buy. If it's 21 or higher, renting is, without a doubt, the smarter financial play. And if you're in that middle zone, well, you're on the fence and we'll need our other tools.
Our next tool is the 5% rule. This one is my favorite for a quick back-of-the-napkin calculation. It's a clever way to compare the money you'll never get back as a homeowner, you know, things like property taxes, insurance, maintenance, against the money you'll never get back as a renter, which is, well, your rent. So let's make it real. Say you're looking at a $400,000 house. The 5% rule tells you that your monthly break-even point is about $1,666. So if you can find a similar place to rent for less than that, boom, you're actually coming out ahead financially by renting. But this last tool, this one is probably the most important one. It's the ultimate decider. It's called the break-even horizon. All it does is tell you exactly how many years you have to live in a house for buying to finally become cheaper than renting was.
And for 2026, the national average for that number is 5 years and 8 months. If you remember one thing from this whole explainer, make it this. Because if you can't honestly commit to staying in one place for at least that long, the math is pretty unforgiving. Renting is almost certainly the smarter choice for you.
So now you have the toolkit. Let's put it to work and see how 2 huge variables, we're talking location and those sneaky hidden costs, can completely flip the answer from a definite yes buy to a hard no way, just rent. So where is buying still a clear winner? Well, have a look at the Midwest. In places like Chicago and Cleveland, those price-to-rent ratios are way below 15. In Chicago, you're actually saving almost $500 a month by owning instead of renting. It's a no-brainer. But now let's jump over to the coasts, and whoa, it is a totally different story. That ratio in San Jose is a mind-blowing 45. That means you would pay over $4,700 extra every single month just for the privilege of owning. In markets like these, renting isn't just a better choice, it's pretty much the only sane choice. Then you've got these other cities, the Sunbelt boomtowns that exploded during the pandemic. Here, the problem is different. It's that prices are actually expected to go down. I mean, why would you rush to buy an asset that's probably going to be worth less in a year? The smart money here says you rent, you wait, and you let the market find its footing.
But you know, the mortgage and the price tag are just the beginning of the story. There is a new villain that has crept into every home budget, and it can absolutely wreck your finances. And that is homeowners insurance.
Just take a look at how insane this has gotten. A few years ago, insurance was maybe 4% of your total monthly housing cost. Today, it's 9%. It has more than doubled its share of the pie, becoming this massive, unpredictable burden that you just have to pay.
And of course, you can't forget about good old maintenance. You know, the leaky faucet, the roof repair. The rule is you should budget anywhere from 1 to 4% of your home's value every year. For a pretty average house, that could be up to $14,000. That's a cost that renters just don't have.
So, after all of that, what's the verdict? What's the final answer? Well, look, my goal here was never to give you one single answer. It was to give you a clear, simple framework so you could find the answer for yourself.
And here it is, your 3-step plan. Step 1, run the numbers. Use those quick tools, the price-to-rent ratio and the 5% rule, to get a gut check. Step 2, analyze your city. Figure out if it's a buyer's market, a renter's paradise, or a place where you should just wait and see. And step 3, be brutally honest with yourself. Can you meet that 5-year, 8-month break-even timeline?
We've given you the toolkit. We've walked through the new reality of the Great Housing Reset. So now the final question. It's all yours. For your life and in your city, what does the math tell you to do?
Before we finish, let me give you a few tips. And remember that we upload videos every day.
Hey there, if you've decided that 2026 is going to be the year you finally get a handle on your debt, then you are in exactly the right place. We're going to build a clear, actionable plan to help you take back control of your finances. For good.
Okay, let's just rip the Band-Aid off with a number that might hit a little close to home. According to Experian, the average debt for a consumer in the US is over $100,000. So if you're feeling that weight, the very first thing you need to know is you are not by any means alone in this.
And let's be real, it's never just about the numbers, is it? It's a heavy weight. It's that knot in your stomach that can mess with your sleep, your relationships, your whole sense of well-being. It is a constant nagging stress.
But what if this year is different? What if 2026 is the year you decide to stop letting that number call the shots? What if this is the year you finally make a plan to fight back and actually win? That's exactly what we're here to do. Because you know what? Getting out of debt isn't some kind of magic trick. It's about having a strategy. So come on, let's build your plan right here, right now.
So every good plan starts with knowing your starting point. And when it comes to debt, that means figuring out exactly where you stand. Okay, first step, time for some radical honesty. You need to make a list of every single debt you have. I'm talking credit cards, car loans, student loans, the whole shebang. For each one, write down these details and pay very close attention to that interest rate, the APR. That little number is the real villain of the story. It's what tells you how much each debt is really costing you.
All right, once you've got that list, you've hit your first big fork in the road. You've got to choose your game plan. And it really boils down to a classic showdown. What's more important to you, the math or the motivation? This breaks it down perfectly. On one side, you have the debt snowball. This one's all about psychology. You attack your smallest debt first, no matter the interest rate. Why? To get that quick win, that feeling of, yes, I did it, which fuels you to keep going. Then you have the debt avalanche. This is pure, cold, hard math. You target the debt with the highest interest rate, which will, without a doubt, save you the most money over time.
So, which one is right for you?
Look, the best method is the one you'll actually stick with. It's that simple. If you know that you thrive on quick wins and you'll get discouraged otherwise, the snowball is your friend. But if the very idea of paying one extra penny in interest to a bank makes you furious, then the avalanche is your weapon of choice. Now, no matter which strategy you pick, snowball or avalanche, there are ways to kick things into high gear. Let's talk about the tools that can supercharge your journey. To throw extra money at your debt, you first have to find that extra money. And that means a budget. The 50-30-20 rule is a super simple way to start. 50% of your income goes to what you absolutely need, 30% goes to what you want, and that last 20%, that's your power play fund. That's for savings and, more importantly right now, for making those extra debt payments. And of course, the other side of the coin from budgeting is boosting your income. Even a temporary side hustle can make a huge difference. Think about it. Every single dollar you make from some freelance work or selling stuff you don't need anymore
can be thrown like a grenade right at your debt principal. Here's another powerful tool: debt consolidation. The idea is pretty straightforward. You take a bunch of your high-interest debts and roll them all into one new loan that hopefully has a lower interest rate. Not only does this save you money, but it just simplifies your life. One payment instead of 5. Just remember, this tool helps you organize the fight. It doesn't win it for you.
Okay, let's get into some of the bigger guns. If you're looking at your debt list and feeling like it's a really big mountain to climb, you might need a more powerful tool.
Here's a little secret a lot of people don't know. You can often just ask for a lower interest rate on your credit card. Seriously, here's the basic script. You call them up, you remind them you've been a good customer with on-time payments, and you politely ask for a rate reduction. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? They say no? That one 5-minute phone call could save you hundreds or even thousands of dollars.
Now, for people in a really tough spot, there's something called debt settlement. And the promise, as you can see, is incredibly tempting. Pay just a fraction of what you actually owe. It sounds almost too good to be true, right? Well, here's the catch, and it's a big one. First, debt settlement will absolutely wreck your credit score for years. And second, that money the creditor forgives, the IRS usually sees that as taxable income, so you could get hit with a surprise tax bill. It can be a lifeline for some, but you have to go in with your eyes wide open to the consequences. Now, if that all sounds way too intense, but you still feel like you need an expert in your corner, check out credit counseling. These are usually nonprofit organizations with certified counselors who are like financial coaches. They'll help you build a realistic plan and can even work with your creditors on something called a debt management plan to lower your rates. You know, getting out of debt isn't a quick sprint. It's a marathon. So the last and maybe most important piece of the puzzle is figuring out how you're going to stay motivated when that first burst of energy starts to fade. Here are 3 simple keys. First, don't just stare at the huge final number. Break it down into smaller goals, like pay off the first 1,000. Second, when you hit one of those goals, celebrate. Give yourself a small, budget-friendly reward. And third, find someone to tell. Having an accountability partner, someone you can share your wins and struggles with, is an absolute game changer.
So there you have it. That's the framework. That's how you can make 2026 the year you become debt-free. But remember, a better financial future doesn't just start on January 1st. It starts the moment you decide to act. So the only real question left is, what's your first step going to be?
We upload videos every day. Subscribe and become part of the family. See you tomorrow.